matter to the society at large and matter to the lives that we touch. So today, I would like to just spend a bit of time. I hope you can see the screen I'm sharing on the topic. And I picked the topic future of business because I think it's something that is worthwhile for us to think about and centered around these two perhaps seemingly contradictory objectives of profit and purpose. But first, I wanted to start by, we can move this forward. Okay. Start with a story. And I don't know whether you can see this. This is not Star Wars. This is not Pearl Harbor. But this happened in the Gulf of Mexico on the 20th of April 2010. Two explosions ripped through this 33,000 ton, 560 million oil rig belonging to a company, one of the largest oil companies in the world, British Petroleum or BP. The rig is called Deepwater Horizon, and it was located about 83 kilometers to the south of the port of Venice in Louisiana, USA, in the Gulf of Mexico. The explosion caused the rig to burn for 36 hours, combusting 2.6 million liters of oil, leaving a trail of smoke that was over 30 miles. 30 miles is, about 40, 50 kilometers high. Deepwater Horizon sank 2 days later on the 22nd of April. And for the next 84 days, until it was capped on 15th of July, oil continued to spill into the Gulf. This is the aftermath. It was the largest marine oil spill in US waters, 5 million barrels of oil and 800 million liters. 800 million liters, just imagine, just try and wrap your mind around that figure, spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. Of the 126 workers who were on board, 11 were dead and 17 injured. And the oil slick covered an area of 149,000 square kilometers. Just for comparison, Singapore is 700 square kilometers. So just imagine how big the area was. And 1,770 kilometers of the shoreline in the southern part of the US was polluted. What is the financial impact? President Obama basically arm-twisted BP to set up a 20 billion escrow fund to address the financial impact. In 8 weeks, it paid out $2 billion and to 127,000 claimants, and it was fully utilized, 20 billion, fully utilized by 2013, 3 years later. It suffered losses of over 40 billion in costs related to the cleanup and recovery. And in terms of market cap, it lost more than $100 billion worth of market capitalization. This thing did not just happen overnight, okay? This is not a one-off. It was not something that was just bad luck. I think it really epitomizes how the company approached safety. In 2005, 15 of the workers died in its Texas City refinery, 1.5 billion losses. Within 12 months, another incident happened, spilling oil into Prudhoe Bay in Alaska from a pipeline that was badly corroded. And a few years later, another incident similar to Deepwater Horizon occurred in the Caspian Sea. And what was reported, of course, these incidents led to investigations, and the Baker Report investigated the Texas City incident. And within the report, it states that the company had cut back heavily on maintenance and safety measures at the plant in order to curtail costs. And that responsibility for the explosion ultimately rested with company senior executives. So why did it happen? There are many reports, and in fact, there's one report by the Presidential Commission on Deepwater Horizon that concluded that there were 3 major decisions, and they're quite technical, so I wouldn't be too try to explain all these things. But there were 3 major decisions taken in terms of the rig itself, the well casing, the centralizers, decision not to perform a cement bond lock. We don't need to know what these are, but basically the court testimony looked at these three decisions, and key actors in the company came down on the side of cost reduction and expediency over caution. That means they prioritize cost reduction, speed, ultimately profits over safety. So really, I think the reason why I started with this story is really that, you know, in business, we always deal with these dilemmas, you know. Whatever we do, sometimes there is an element of, can we do it faster, cheaper, better? But sometimes there are sacrifices and trade-offs to be made. And, you know, we have no choice but to confront these issues. And really my hope is not to give you answers, but to provide you with some things that you can think about and possibly, you know, what role you can play in a different trajectory for business in the future. That's why I call it the future of business. So this segment, I would like to cover just, you know, the shift from shareholder primacy to serving stakeholders, the future of business that means profit and purpose, and then what we as MBPC and our Company of Good initiative are doing in this space. And finally, with some thoughts on what you can do. What is your part in all of this? So it's exciting for us. I think we start with a statement that was put out by the American Business Roundtable. This comprises 181 CEOs of America's largest corporation, and they account for something like 7 trillion in revenues, and they affirm the fundamental commitment to represent all their stakeholders and to deliver value to all of them, customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and shareholders. This statement marked a radical departure from the roundtable, who for more than 20 years always focused on shareholder primacy. And it stated that the paramount duty of management and of board of directors is to the corporation's stockholders, shareholders, and the interests of other stakeholders are only relevant as a derivative of the duty to the stockholders. So it marked a major shift. This is very important. It really turned, you know, 180 degrees when they put out this statement in August last year. And who were the ones? I mean, you're talking about people like Tim Cook, Jeff Bezos, you know, really the who's who in corporate America. And even before the statement was made, prominent business leaders were already announcing a pivot away from this one-track mind of only being concerned about shareholders. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, wrote to CEOs in 2018, and this I quote, "A company cannot achieve long-term profits without embracing purpose and considering the needs of a broad range of stakeholders." And Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan and chairman of the Business Roundtable, wrote to shareholders, his shareholders, that it's not enough just for companies to meet the letter and spirit of the law. They can also aggressively work to improve society. They can take positions on public policy that they think are good for the company. So why are some of these world's biggest companies and some of the most important CEOs pivoting from shareholder primacy to a recognition that companies exist to serve all stakeholders? I think the change is happening because corporates are realizing that the conventional wisdom, what they have believed and what they have been doing for the last 50 years, has resulted in a great deal of harm to society and to the world. And this doctrine, this conventional wisdom is actually rooted in Milton Friedman's very famous article in the New York Times in 1970, where you can see on this, he says that there is only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits. So this is the only thing, the only social responsibility of business is to increase profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. So really, this was really open season. You go and make as much money as possible. Just take care of our shareholders. Everything else, you don't have to worry about, as long as you stay within the rules of the game. But what has that led to? I think I've already talked about the top left corner. You see Deepwater Horizon, and you see the picture of the devastation to the wildlife in the Gulf of Mexico. Research shows that 10 years after the incident, people and animals who came into contact with the oil slick as a result of the incident continue to suffer health consequences. Another example is Cambridge Analytica. In 2018, it was revealed that this political consulting firm had harvested raw data from up to 87 million Facebook profiles during the 2016 presidential elections in the US. This data was exposed via a quiz app. The app developer then shared the data with Cambridge Analytica without the people's consent. And following the revelation, some Facebook employees claimed that user protection was a low priority to decision makers. In fact, one said that the people whose job is to protect the user always are fighting an uphill battle against the people whose job is to make money for the company. So if you're trying to protect your users, trying to do right by your customers, you are facing an uphill task against people who say, let's make more money for the company. Then there's also Rio Tinto. In May of this year, the mining giant destroyed 2 Aboriginal rock shelters in Western Australia. These caves had archaeological evidence of human habitation stretching back 46,000 years. But unfortunately, it sat above 8 million tons of high-grade iron ore, worth at least Australian $130 million. So a parliamentary inquiry is ongoing, but already the fallout has started. Rio Tinto announced that its CEO and 2 senior executives are stepping down because of the incident. So business decisions have a great impact in so many different aspects of life, in society, in communities, in the natural environment. And in these examples, it seems that the conventional wisdom to make as much money as possible, as long as it's not illegal to do so, is okay. So it risks real harm to the environment and to society. So I believe it is really in reaction to these realities that corporations and CEOs are now rethinking that conventional wisdom, the Milton Friedman doctrine. And there's now a starting to rethink what are the business models and the strategies so that we can embrace and include all stakeholders in business decisions. So there could be a question in your head, is it possible to balance all this people, planet, and profit? What must we do to make changes that are concrete, visible, and lasting? How do we go beyond just a few big companies making grand statements to transform business? How to make it real for big companies and small, listed and unlisted in all sectors from different countries? How can we bring everyone into a movement that will ultimately protect and safeguard our future? So in recent years, we've seen that there's been growing interest in adjusting, recalibrating our accounting and reporting standards and frameworks by rethinking the very nature of the bottom line. What is the bottom line? What is ultimately the key metric to judge the success of a company, and how this value can be measured? So that includes not just the shareholders, the ones who provide the capital, but all stakeholders in this measurement. Here you see a wide range of existing and emerging reporting standards and frameworks in the world today. There are different guidelines certifications and local and international reporting standards, which inform the ESG. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance Ratings, and exists alongside international, intergovernmental, and business world commitments to sustainability. So the challenge for us really is how to harmonize this. A study with McKinsey showed that actually a lot of executives are confused. There are so many frameworks, and it's very difficult to navigate all these things and figure out which one works. And some of them are actually very, very onerous. You actually need a consultant, and you need to pay them lots of money, or you need a small little team in the company just to get the reporting done. CDL is one of the leaders in Singapore. They're doing this harmonization and aligning actually some of the different frameworks in the 2020 sustainability report. So I commend this work to you. I think it's an interesting example of a company that sees the importance of the future. You see, it talks about changing the climate, changing the future, and really how companies are taking this very seriously and trying to move and move their company, their customers, their whole value chain into a different way of conducting their business. Against the backdrop of 50 years of shareholder primacy, we also see now actually a chorus of voices among customers, investors, academics, politicians advocating for a different way of doing business that is ultimately better for people and for planet. Every business, big or small, knows that it needs to anticipate what's coming, the future, in order to ensure that it remains competitive and it can survive and hopefully thrive. So in a rapidly changing VUCA, we call it VUCA, VUCA, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, this VUCA world, it is critical to be ahead of the curve and take action today so that we and our companies can be ready for the future. And I believe the future of business is purposeful business. Purposeful business doesn't mean I give away all my money for the greater good. It doesn't mean making hasty decisions to succumb to societal pressures or doing ad hoc CSR activities or treating sustainability as a matter of risk management, or worse, just to check the box. It means providing and producing profitable solutions to tackle and solve problems of people and planet, and grounding the business model and strategies on innovative ways to tackle these problems. So why is MVPC involved in this work? And maybe I start with broader vision of MVPC, that even though we're a National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, and I think we still want to make sure that volunteerism and philanthropy continues to be strong, but we realize that we are not just talking about two behaviors, and therefore we just measure how much we see of these two behaviors. We think that the change needs to happen inside out. And the change starts by people, organizations, and leaders thinking differently of what is their role in society. And so we came up with this vision of Singapore as a city of good, where people, organizations, and leaders come together to give their best for others. And when we talk about give your best, really it starts by being other-centered. You can, of course, give without really caring, but you can't care without giving. And so for us, it's really, we want to again talk about starting inside out. It's quite natural perhaps to start by being me first, but I think over time we want to cultivate this sense that for Singapore to remain united, to remain cohesive, and to sustain into the future, we need a Singapore where people care for one another, where people want to give of their best for others. And it should not be just, altruistic, because ultimately there's an element of self-interest, because then you can live in a better Singapore, you live in a better community, you live in a place that is safe and secure, and an economy that's thriving, a society that is, stable, without people, killing each other and demonstrations on the streets. This is how we keep Singapore strong. And so the City of Good has those three pillars: people of good, which is the masses, everyone can do something. And we hope that all 6 million inhabitants in Singapore will become, people of good who can be other-centered and exhibit, other-centered behavior in all aspects of life. And I think the other way to mobilize is through organizations, and it's not just companies. Obviously, companies are very important, but also, communities, neighborhoods, school alumni, clubs, and so forth, religious organizations, where you don't just mobilize individuals, but you organize organizations, and they bring along a big group of people. And obviously, leaders as well, and not just political or corporate leaders, but anyone who has influence. So if you can influence 5 people, you can influence 10 people. If we can get you to change and you can help influence those 5 or 10 people, I think it is a way of multiplying our effect, multiplying our impact, and helping us accelerate the process of building a city of good. So Company of Good exists within the organization of good, and this is our theory of change. I don't want to go into too much detail, but to give you the sense that, it starts with, maybe from left to right? It starts with the change in the mindset and the behavior. Then we have to build capacity and capability to enable people to do what they would like to do. Growing social capital is about connections, about community building, so that you're not alone and you can leverage on other people's resources in a like-minded community to multiply the impact that the community can make, and ultimately also be able to access opportunities, so the match the needs with the people who have the ability and the desire to give. And this is really what we try to do, ultimately to impact the community in the company of good. So traditional business thinking, as you know, we mentioned this with the Milton Friedman doctrine. The firm is at the center, and basically, everything is just about the firm, and ultimately it is about the shareholders. But some of you may know about Copernicus, who in fact challenged the conventional wisdom when it was the conventional wisdom to think that the earth is the center of the universe. Copernicus said actually it's not true. It's actually the sun is the center, and the other planets revolve around it. And I think the kind of problems that we face is when we put the wrong thing at the center. When we put the earth at the center, the firm at the center, you create all these sorts of pathologies of a dysfunctional economic system that creates problems for the environment, problems for communities, and destroy people's lives. And so if we change to purpose at the center, where it is a clear understanding the firm serves the broader good of society. The firm brings together resources, creates solutions that are economically viable, and sells them at a good price to make profit, but not such extreme levels of profit that they can only achieve by squeezing everyone else in the value chain. So when purpose is at the center, you have a different outcome. And I believe purpose is not contradictory to profit. In fact, profit through purpose is probably the most sustainable way of doing business. So the sweet spot really is when you have the ability to bring all the assets that you have as a company, the expertise, and then you see business opportunities to improve the condition of people or planet and the society needs. And when it all comes together, that's how shared value is created. So we use the 4I framework. This is something that we've borrowed from the US, an organization called Points of Light. And we want to make the corporate giving holistic. It starts with investment. How does a company give? How do they integrate the giving in terms of their overall business processes and procedures? How do they institutionalize it so that it's not at the whim and fancy of one person? If that person leaves, then nothing happens. So we want to institutionalize it. And ultimately, it is about measuring impact. What are the outcomes that all this work is helping to make in society, and how will it impact your efforts. So, and it's not just about big companies, because I wanted to share and bring it home, because, and this is a story of a SMU graduate. This young man is actually a recently graduated a master's in tri-sector collaboration from SMU. But he founded, this startup called Geylang Adventures that brings people on tours around Geylang at night and shares the sort of soft underbelly of Singapore society, shows them the social issues in the area, and really helps people become more aware, more sensitive, and hopefully they're more willing and to be able to give and to contribute, to volunteer, to donate, to do certain things that actually help some of these residents, sometimes the downtrodden in our community, but oftentimes hidden from view. And for him, doesn't have to wait for the government, doesn't have to wait until he's a big CEO. He does what he can right then. This was 2 years ago, 27. He's now maybe 29. But you can start wherever you are and make a difference. So what can you do? As a consumer, a customer, be conscious who you're buying for. You vote with your dollar. And when you engage with a brand or an organization, if there's a chance, make your views known. If they're not doing things right, make it known to them. As a future employee, when you go for your interviews, I think it's good to do your research about the company, understand where they stand on certain issues, on the environment, on social and human issues, so that you know that you're going to step into a culture that is going to be, is it something like a culture that is like BP, where it's very much focused on expediency and cost reduction versus safety. Is that the way that they do business? And you want to know, because I think that is going to be the reality when you join that company. As an investor, you could be investing now, maybe in the future. Make your voice heard. Who do you invest with? Are they companies that take care of all stakeholders, or are they the ones that focus very narrowly, make as much money as possible? I don't care what else happens. And then as a citizen, which all of us are, and you can speak out, write letters to member of parliament, make your views known, and really just be an advocate. And in future, when you become CEO, or even when you start a business, or you do something as a social enterprise, or you start, a charity or ground up, I think you can also help us in this movement. So start now. I think, if you believe in this and you think that you can be part of this future and help to create this future, spread the message, help to ensure that companies hear you, companies know that this matters to you as a customer, as a future employee, maybe as an investor, but certainly as a citizen. You are a concerned citizen and you have a right to hold companies accountable. Tell them during your internships or employment, this is where you stand, and pick the ones that are aligned with your values. Start a ground up. If you have an idea like Ying Zhou, the young man that I highlighted, start something on your own. But do your research first, so that you don't get and start things that already are existing. Do things that maybe there are gaps. And where there is a gap, there's no one serving a particular community or a need, step into the gap and be the solution that will help the society as a whole. You can also look at volunteering opportunities, fundraising, donating through giving.sg, which is owned by NVPC. And then there are, of course, resources on Company of Good and things that you can look up. Yeah, there are stories, there are good examples, there are people who have gone through our programs as a fellow of the Company of Good. So feel free to access those resources, because I think you really have a chance to make a difference. I'm sorry for this slide, it's a bit blurry, And it really talks about this quote by Edmund Burke. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men, and I would say good women, to do nothing. If we look and see something that is not quite right and we do nothing, we say nothing, we just, close our ears, close our eyes, close our mouth, we let it happen, it will be a shame. And this is one of those quotes that I think in Germany, those who saw the atrocities being perpetrated on the Jews, a lot of people did nothing and said nothing. And so maybe I'll just share one story, and I know I took more time than anticipated, but one story about a time when I was in an AGM. So I'm a member of this particular group, and I'm just an ordinary member. I'm not an office holder. So in AGM, I'm just looking at the financial reports, and I see two entities of this group, and saw the way that they were actually interestingly managing their reserves very differently. So companies or organizations have cash reserves, and one was putting them in a fixed deposit, getting about 1.1, 1.2% interest rate. The other was all their cash reserves were in current accounts. So the interest rate is, as you know, probably next to zero. And so I was like wondering, it's quite interesting because these two entities belong to the same group, but for some reason, you have actually a lot of money, actually millions of dollars, actually sitting in cash reserve in a current account that actually produces nothing. Whereas if you follow the example of the other, the say entity A and B are both under one group, right? Entity A has their cash reserves in fixed deposit, 1 point something percent. Every $1,000,000, 1% is 10,000. And if you're talking multiple millions, in 1 year without doing anything, you get tens of thousands of dollars as additional interest income. So I asked the question, I said, why is it different? And the response was that, oh, we're not really a for-profit, so actually it's not really necessary for us to worry too much about, our cash reserves. So for me, it was an opportunity cost. It's very strange that you think that having millions of dollars producing next to nothing in terms of interest income is okay. So I basically, I think I was saying this respectfully. I said, look, I think you should review it, and I don't think it's risky. I don't think your reserves will be at risk, but I think you should consider putting the money into at least fixed deposit. So that's year one. Year two, AGM annual report, same thing. You see the same thing happening again. So 1 year has passed, right? And we're talking about 10,000 for every $1,000,000 that is kind of basically leaked out of the system because they did nothing. They basically heard me, gave me a response, and brushed me aside. So year two, I asked the same question, same answer. Year three, I happened not to attend the AGM. And then year four, just before the AGM, I happened to encounter the person who was going to chair the meeting. Then he said, hey, are you going to ask the same question again? I said, yes, I will. I will keep asking until one day you'll do something about it. So in year four, at the AGM, again, same thing, nothing has changed. So 4 years. Then the chairman said, oh, by the way, this thing is like this, but we heard you, and we are making effort to convert our cash reserves to fixed deposit. So we're talking about 4 years, many millions of dollars that have kind of leaked out of the system. And the thing is, who's holding them to account? If you look at the overall scheme of things, a few tens of thousands of dollars, maybe for someone out there, they don't think it's very important. But to me, this is a non-profit. It's not like it's a $1 billion business. The budget every year is a few million. So if you can get 10, 20, 30,000 times 4 years, it's a tidy sum of money. And why do I share this story? Because I think the issue is this. One, the powers that be sometimes don't like to hear that you disagree with them. And if they feel that you are going against them, there is that code of silence. People are not supposed to say things that contradict the chairman of the meeting or contradict the office holders. In the end, you know, a lot of these resources were leaked out of the organization. I chose to speak up. Unfortunately, there is a price. I was not very much liked by the people who were in power. I mean, this is just a small example, and the cost may not be very high, but the same scenario plays out in companies. And you can imagine in BP at Deepwater Horizon, someone seeing something that they know is not right. The question is, do we speak out? And when we speak out, we know sometimes there is a cost. And the cost, not just in terms of like my situation where I get shunned, but it could be career, it could be certain things that are very serious. That when you speak out, there is a cost. And unfortunately, I cannot give you an answer because it is something that we have to decide for ourselves. But ultimately, what is the future that we want? I think the future of business is not a vague concept. The future of business is actually the people in the audience today. Because the future of business is going to be determined by the people who are going to be in the business. And you know, you're in your 20s, in 20 years, in 10 years, you will be in senior positions, possibly running major corporations. What you think is right, what you think is the right thing for companies to do is going to be where business will go. And so today, I just want to put this before you, that I hope that we can think about business in terms of serving the myriad of stakeholders and business as a force for good. Business that makes positive social impact and contributes to building a city of good. So I hope to stop there. I want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. I spoke more than I should have, but I thank you for, and thank Boon Chuan for the opportunity. It's really a privilege to be here and happy to have more discussion and more sharing. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tony. Really, I think there's so much to take away from what you shared. And, one of the things that's very current in our society today, and it came up again in the elections recently, was this whole thing about social inequality. And many fingers are pointed at the government, or you should do this, you should do that, and all that. But I think one of the maybe big takeaways for us today is it's not just the government's job, right? It's the whole ecosystem. We all have a part
Indeed.
of it. It's our individual responsibility as well. We have things that we can contribute, and also it's something that the companies that we will work for, they can play a part in this as well. And I think this is a kind of activism, that is good and that is actually productive, rather than just unproductive, making noise kind of activism. The other thing that I really loved was also what you talked about, the traditional versus Copernican thinking, what's at the center. I think that's certainly true for companies. It's also certainly true about our own lives as well. What's the purpose of our lives? What's the purpose of the companies that we want to work for, and trying to find that alignment, right? Trying to find that alignment. So there's so much, so many gems. Also the thing about, there's a price to pay sometimes, right? And to say the right thing, or to be willing to speak up, giving voice to your values and things like that. So what we want to do now actually is, just to invite questions. I'm sure